Hello, and welcome to another episode of Five Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green. Happy to be here with you and happy to have you here with us. And as look like we're winding up our first half of the ninth season, here we are in early December. I could not be more happy to have our guest close off this first section, and that is, you may know him. If you read the trades at all, you might know him. And it's not Aaron Zamzow. Okay, Aaron gets a lot of articles, but and he just broke through in Crackle magazine with our good friend Corey Pern. So Peter has been or is the conference director and editor-in-chief of Firehouse. He has worked at Firehouse since 1999, serving in various roles on both Firehouse Magazine and Firehouse.com staffs. He completed an internship with the Rochester, New York Fire Department and served with fire departments in Glenwood Landing and Rush, New York, and Laurel, Maryland. And now he is actually the editor-in-chief and director of conferences for Firehouse, not magazine, it's greater. It's not just Firehouse Magazine, but the Firehouse label. Would that be right to say?
Yeah, the brand is what we call it in the media biz.
Right, the brand. That's good. Well, Peter, thank you for joining me once again. I really appreciate it. We've had some nice emails going back and forth, and I can't tell you how much your friendship and you checking in on me has meant to me. I don't have a lot of big name connections, even after these nearly 50 years, but I have some good friends from the fire service, and you're one of them, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And every time I get an email from you, I know it puts a little smile on my face in the morning. You're up before me, so I'm definitely getting a morning email from you. But it's not uncommon to get an evening email or update back from you, and it's good to see the work that you're doing. You may say you don't have a lot of those big names, but you're working with them day in and day out, whether it's through the task force or the shows that you're doing. So I wouldn't say that at all on your
Well,
end.
thank you. I appreciate that. And Peter and I were connecting via email the last couple of weeks about what we're going to talk today. And I guess Peter thought of it, and then it just popped into my head as well. Today, we're recording this on the 4th of December. And as most of you know, yesterday was the 25th commemoration of the loss of 6 brave brothers from the fire department in Worcester, Massachusetts. That city was only 12 to 14 miles away from where I lived in Framingham. And as a kid, there was a great big department store there called Spags. And they sold everything for little prices. And my dad would drive us out there, me and a couple of my friends, and we'd go out and do shopping in Spags. And my dad knew how much I loved visiting fire stations. And so he'd take us to a station or two, whether it was in Worcester or in between Framingham and Worcester. He knew that's what I loved to do, was visiting him. At that point in time, had no idea that I was going to actually become a firefighter myself, but it was all good learning. And so Peter and I decided that the first topic we want to talk about this morning is the tragedy in Worcester in December of 1999. And some of us were listening to it live. I was able to tune into on the internet to a TV station in Boston. I was only getting the audio, but I was hanging on, tooth and nail. I didn't know what was going to be the next radio call. And I guess, like many others, although it was hard to understand back then, Peter, is that the chief of department made one of the most difficult decisions a chief could ever have to make for his department and his colleagues there. And yet that was the only way, with his decision, to save more lives and prevent any other losses that night.
Yeah, it's it's interesting, right? So it's a 25th anniversary. It's also my 25th anniversary at Firehouse. I did leave 2 years full time. I was a part-time or freelancer for Firehouse at that time, but I joined Firehouse beginning of '99, March of '99. Within a month, we had the Columbine shooting. That was the first real big incident that we had kind of covered. And I was in the magazine, so obviously, back then the coverage was different. The website firehouse.com was a completely different team. Um, but as I guess I think I'm a millennial, and so what do? You go to the internet to see what's going on, and when the Worcester fire happened, I mean, I remember everything so vividly. I was with my girlfriend at the time. We were having pizza. It was a Friday night, and I got the first page over the Breaking News Network, and reached out to Dave Iannone, who was running Firehouse.com. He's the founder, and we were kind of going back and forth, right? And I remember the old Nokia cell phone I had. I mean, just how antiquated technology was at that point. And then a phone call comes in, and then a friend says, "Hey, I heard there's multiple guys missing," and then it's all these rumors go, right. This is before texting. This is before social media. And it's crazy. Every hour I was on firehouse.com, right? And again, this is still the dial-up era too, right? So you're having to log on to your computer, log on to AOL to get online, or, to get your connection to the internet. And as we just kind of watch this national tragedy unfold, I remember every single thing about that night. I don't think I went to bed till about 3 o'clock in the morning, when we kind of knew what was going on. And I was in constant contact with Dave and Chris Hebert, who was the other co-founder of Firehouse.com, learning about what's going on. And I had seen pictures of Worcester Fire over the years, in the magazine with the hot shots and covers. And I knew it was a very busy department, a very typical urban, northeastern city, a lot of three-story frame houses.
Triple deckers, yeah.
Yep. And they had done a lot of work here, but this was definitely, it was different. And I mean, last night was just it was an amazing memorial service. I don't know. I heard anywhere from 800 to 1,200 people showed up. And I was here for the memorial. So December 9th of '99 was the memorial service, right? 6 days after the fire.
Right.
And think about that again, 6 days after the fire. I'm not going to plug firehouse.com here, but firehouse.com was able to get Amtrak and airlines, to get travel discounts for firefighters to come in. I think it was 35,000 people plus attended the memorial service here. And I was a little late. I woke up late, so our arrival to Worcester was a little late that morning. And we had to park about 2 miles from the Centrum at that time, which is where the memorial service was being held. And I was walking up. I was in uniform, but I was taking pictures. I was in line. I said, "You know what? Let me just do pictures for the magazine." And the only thing you heard was footsteps, and there was a bell clanging and footsteps, and it was a 2 mile walk, and that's all you could hear. Thousands of people lining the streets, kids with banners, and the memorial service. I mean, again, I can remember every single moment inside that building, just being in there. I've never been in a crowd so large before. And again, this was 6 days before. And at the same time, while the memorial service was going on, they were still at the cold storage site, toiling through the debris, trying to find one missing member.
Yeah.
And we went to the to the site afterwards, now the memorial. And, we saw them working for a while. We had a little tour of the site, and it's just, it's such an impact on me as a volunteer firefighter at the time. But really, it created that foundation for me in my first year at Firehouse of what Firehouse is supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be here to educate, and more importantly, carry on those messages. And there's a group of instructors that was kind of started. Andy White, who was a firefighter, I think he was an officer at the time in Worcester. He retired as a deputy chief, and he had reached out to Mickey Conboy from FDNY and Butch Cobb from Jersey City to kind of get them to come up here to start teaching some RIT training and some other firefighter survival skills. That turned into a 6-year seminar here in Worcester. They were expecting 200. They had 1,500 the first year. They ran it for 6 years. They even ran it just a few weeks after 9/11. And the FDNY guys who were instructing for that conference, they still came up here. They trekked up from the pile. They left a funeral and came up here and taught. I remember I actually left a memorial service at the time for Pete and Tommy Langone. They were volunteers in Roslyn, in the neighboring community, and their memorial service was that morning of the seminar beginning. And I left the memorial service, hopped in a car, and I drove up to from Long Island to Worcester. And like, I'll never forget, I stopped to get gas. Somebody paid for the gas. Again, hindsight, I should have taken the uniform off. I should have thrown something else on. Tolls, they waved you through. Somebody grabbed food and a drink and passed it along to me. And I just, at that time, obviously, again, that the next national tragedy was 9/11. But just that impact of that group. And so here it was, about 24 of them got together on Monday night, the night before the service here. And they reflect on, what it was 24 years ago when they first met, right? And one of them said, I wish I had never met you, but I'm so glad I was able to go through this with you, right? And again, these are gray-haired guys, right? They are, some of them are retired 15 plus. Yeah, exactly. Yep, 15 plus years. I will say, though, New England guys, they don't really age that much. They look the same as they did when I first met them 25 years ago. But
the cold preserves us. That's why.
Exactly. Yep. But to see them still get together, and they don't talk much about the fire. It's what's going on in their lives. And I haven't seen them in 5 years. Most of them. I was up here for the 20th anniversary as well. But again, that's what the Brotherhood's about, right? They're still sharing the lesson. They're still taking it forward. I try to do that every possible opportunity I have through my, channels here at Firehouse. And it's just one of so many incidents, so many tragedies that we've covered. But, this was kind of the foundation of my career at Firehouse was the Worcester fire. And, that started rapid intervention training, which was around in a lot of places, but that put it on the national scope.
Yeah.
Thermal imaging, right? I mean, when you talk about thermal imaging and other technology, radios and everything else that's come of it. And, unfortunately, in the last 25 years, they lost 6 on December 3rd, 1999, and they've lost 3 more in the line of duty since. So as much as they've worked, it is a reminder that no matter what you do, the job is dangerous. The job is the unknown, right? And we saw that earlier this year. I mean, I witnessed 2 bailouts when I was out taking pictures. No matter what you do, no matter how much training you have, you can never prepare for anything. And the one real interesting thing, Steve, is I booked my hotel. I just grabbed the Hilton. I'm a Hilton guy. Grabbed the Hilton hotel. And when I pulled up, I looked at the place and I said, "Wow, this is where the old Central Station was at Major Turnley and Taylor and MLK Boulevard." So the hotel I stayed at is the site of the old Engine 6, Rescue 1, Ladder 1, Car 3 firehouse. And now that's the firefighters that have since moved over to Franklin Street where the fire was. So waking up the morning of December 3rd, it was moving, right? Because here I am literally on the same footprint those guys were the day they came to work and they never came home. And it's weird, right? Those little things that pop up. And that really kind of moved me as I kind of went about my day, knowing I took the same route that they did to the fire. I took it to go to the memorial service to park. And, it really chokes you up,
It does.
It does. But this is a city that hasn't forgotten. The residents haven't forgotten. The young people have learned about it, right? This isn't just a fire service tragedy. This is a Worcester tragedy. It's a New England tragedy. It's a state of Massachusetts tragedy. But this city hasn't forgotten. I was at a restaurant that afternoon. I grabbed a quick bite to eat. There were some firefighters in there, and they were talking to him. And then I got to have dinner with a friend after the memorial service. And there was a couple groups of firefighters there, and the restaurant was taking care of them. And they're, "Hey, thank you for being here for our firefighters." And the woman that we had, who was our server, she was telling us her story about the fire, right? And everybody here has a story,
Sure.
and that's good. Again, 25 years, a quarter of a century,
Yeah.
but these people have not forgotten. And I think that's the one thing I'm going to go home from this trip really really focused on, that you do have to remember, and people do remember, and it will always pull at their heartstrings, myself included.
Right. Well, I hope in the first issue of the new year, in your column, you're going to share what you went through this week with the readers and those online, because you know, as you and I both know, even though I've got a few years on you, but we have a lot of new kids
Yeah.
in the fire service today. Um, and yeah, you know, New England and New York, out towards Chicago and Washington, D.C., we have that little crescent where we still love to do the job, whether we're career or volunteer, uh, but we're proud of who we are and what we do. And when one falls, we all feel the pain. We see that. Thankfully, one of the great parts of social media is that we can spread these notices when there is, God forbid, another line of duty death or severe LODI, that people will have a better understanding because they've learned more about who we are and what we do. Now, yes, there are a lot of people who just think, you know, we put the wet stuff on the red stuff, but we have grown so much in these past 25 years. And considering I've been on that road since 1977, one way or another, it's something that you just don't brush off like a couple of crumbs on your sleeve. This is something that grasps you in your body and your soul. And we hear about it. We read the trades. We listen to the news in our communities. But I'm sorry to say that I still think too many of our citizens take us for granted and don't realize just what we go through to do what we do, and the costs, as you mentioned earlier, the cost of families. You know,
Yeah.
we go out. Are you going to be home for dinner tonight, honey? I don't know. All depends what the calls are going to be. And then we didn't make it into the next morning at dawn. So it's not an easy uh, profession or avocation as a volunteer, because the fact is, as you well know, because you've been on that volunteer side and know, and at the same time you have that great exposure to in Texas with Dallas and Fort Worth, great departments there too. We could go out to, you know, LA to LA County and Orange County out there and Chicago area and all over the country. We have people who dedicate their lives. But I think sometimes those of us who do are taken for granted. And we're not appreciated till something bad happens. And that needs to be changed. You know, I just started with Andy and Nick. I just sent them a couple of rolls. I got some kids like stickers. Even my 3.5-year-old grandson loves stickers. And so I ordered 3 sets of 2 labels to send, and I just send them out to Nick and Andy because I always love to have something that I can show either a parent, which is my business card, or a sticker to the child who sees me walking around with my helmet on or my jacket on and says, "Are you a fireman?" And I said, "Yeah." And I just reach in the pocket. I said, "You like stickers?" I said, "Yeah." And then I said, "You got to listen to mom and dad. You know, you got to be safe. Don't do things they tell you not to do. We don't want to have to come to your house unless it's for a birthday party. But we don't want to come in, have to do rescues at your home. We want you guys to be safe and know how to take care of yourselves in an emergency." And yet, you know, look at the last, I think from Thursday of last week till yesterday's uh, blurbs that come out in the email from the trades, we've still lost more. We still lose more. And we're making strides. And thanks to people like Diane and Paul Cotter, who were the pioneers when there wasn't a wagon, there weren't wheels, there weren't any animals, but they got out and sloughed through that highway of finding out that we had cancer-causing materials in our gear, in a very important product that we depended on, AFFF, but none of us knew that it had carcinogenic poisons in them. But I think people are now more willing to not just, for example, look at hot shots in Firehouse. I think they want to read your column. I think Chief Billy's column, Close Calls, is a godsend because in all the years, and I started reading Firehouse at second issue because I started in '77, and Dennis had just started. May he rest in peace. And I just knew that this was a great place, along with the other couple of the other trades, that could help mold me as a newcomer, no background in the fire service. And I learned so much from them and from reading the trades and going to several conferences. I got to meet Harvey, may he rest in peace, at the conference. And I don't know if you remember, it was the emergency national tour. They had,
Yep.
they had the trucks available, the squad, and met him there. And I got to meet. I was very fortunate that at that same one, I was coming through the tunnel, and there was Chief Rubin. I had met him before, and he said, "Oh, I want you to meet a friend of mine, Chief Bruno." I said, "No, I can't meet Chief Bruno." Because what do you mean? I said, "No, I'm just this. I was a peon. He's the godfather of the fire service." That's how I learned about it, was reading his article every month in the magazine. And I think one of the most important things we have to teach our younger members coming in now is you can't just read a book and learn what to do. You can't just do a drill once a month and be ready to act when necessary. If you're going to be in this vocation or avocation, or even WUI, we need to know what we're doing. And thankfully, we have great people coming out as instructors. Andy, one of the great instructors we have with TICs, thermal imaging cameras. And, he's getting out there. He's going to Europe to teach as well. And I think that that's what we need, as opposed to just a salesperson coming to your door and saying, "Hey, I got this brand new camera for you, TIC for you, only $4,500, and we can take care of it." Never tells you how to use it. Just pull the trigger, you'll be all set. And then you have somebody like Andy or Joe DeVito down here in Southwest Florida, who's a student of Andy's and is doing really well themselves. But we have to encourage our new firefighters, and I don't mean just rookie new first year. I'm talking about with 5 years or less. We need to get them interested to know what this job is really about.
And it's interesting, Steve. I mean, so right there's a lot of conversation. We have an article coming out in this month's issue. It's in the December issue. It's by Courtney Hull out of Wisconsin, and it was a podcast that she was on. I had seen it on Facebook. I listened to it, and it was a fascinating conversation. I'm 46. I don't have kids. My nieces and nephews, I see them, but I'm not in their daily lives, so I don't see how they methodically live their lives, go day by day. But all this conversation of, well, what is it, Generation Z or Generation X, whatever, they want to know the why. They want to know the why. They want to know how. They want to know why. But when you have these conversations, I mean, I'm again very fortunate that when I go to firehouses, we'll talk about incidents and we'll talk about what I've seen or learned here. Because a lot of this is I'm sharing what's been passed along to me from those folks who survived or were at the incident or lost a friend, and we'll talk about things and they'll be, "Never heard of it, never, I don't know that," and it's really a shame. It breaks my heart that especially as a generation that wants to know how and why. But it's interesting. They want to know the why and the how, but they don't want to necessarily know the history,
Yeah.
and that's the why and the how is because of what's historically happened in the past. So you have to do that, whether it's, here in Worcester, it's Charleston, Keokuk, right? I mean, Keokuk is kind of that overlooked fire. That also happened in December of '99 in Iowa. 3 firefighters, 3 children. But it's almost like New York City, right? So you have June, Father's Day of 2001, the Father's Day fire, and they call that the Forgotten Fire, right? And you hate 3 firefighters are killed, dozens suffered, life-altering injuries, overshadowed by 9/11. Of course, the New York City folks remember it, and I was saying to a friend of mine the other day, I was at the Trade Center that day, and in the following days I was there, whether I was there as a photographer with my volunteer firehouse, taking people in from out of town down there. And then lo and behold, same thing. I was going to work on 9/11. The first plane hit. I called my boss, said, "Hey, I'm going to go and take some pictures." Okay, no problem. Not realizing the scope of what was about to unfold. Going to work in November of 2001, a buddy of mine, right, the next 12 days, he chirps me. He's a cop. He says, "Hey, jetliner exploded over the Rockaways down in the southern part of Queens. I'm but 25 minutes away." And the crazy thing is, I don't even remember going to. I was there. There's a funny story. But I won't share that here. But it involved me leading about 20 police officers, 20 police vehicles and fire vehicles behind me. But I didn't want to give up my parking spot. But I end up getting there, and seeing the bodies on the ground, seeing parts of the plane, right, the fuselage, cracked in half, and all this stuff. And I have no recollection of that. And I listen to 1010 Wins. That's that morning news station in New York City, 24-hour news. That's how I start my morning every morning. The first hour of my day, I listen to 1010 Wins, and they'll say, today is the 18th anniversary, 23rd anniversary, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I was there. But because so much has happened, you do, it's almost to the point that it's overwhelming. And it's my job to know this stuff, right? That's my job, to be able to pull that out and remember it and go find it and share it. But I think we need to do a better job in the fire service of remembering this stuff, right? Even the conversations about foam and PFAS. And it's obviously, cancer is a very serious issue. I lost my brother to brain cancer years ago. He was a medic, and they tried to attribute it to the telemetry in the ambulances back in the day, right? When the PFAS issue first came out, I kind of jokingly said to my parents, or to my father, I said, "Hey, all those foam parties we used to have after the open house, right? They'd fill the parking lot with foam, and that would be the end of open house." That is the great unknown. And now that we know things, we do have to look back and see, what we've done, right? And the National Firefighter Registry, I think that's a critical component. I don't think you guys, I know you've talked about it in the past, but that's a critical component. Yeah, it's a little bit of legwork, right? But you documenting those fires to be able to have some historical data on you, God forbid you get sick. And look at the way the fire service is going. Most members are ending up with illnesses, right? I mean, the traditional, the guys that worked the 70s, 80s, and 90s that didn't have masks, that smoked and everything else, I think it was 5 to 7 years is as long as they would survive. And they would die quick when they retire, when once they got sick. But
Right.
now, it's this reoccurring thing, and to be able to document that, not only for your health benefits and for your family's, long-term benefits, but also for the help with the research, right? I mean, every department has that fire that we all know they were exposed to XYZ. And that's why they are, that's why they have members. I mean, Fort Worth, I think they have 2 fires that they can attribute, a number of deaths to, not officially. I just learned the other day that the guys that I grew up with in my volunteer house on the island, their father was one of the first ones to die. He was first due engine to the New York City telephone company fire, and it was at 66. And I just learned the other day from a friend of mine that they're actually going to memorialize him as a line of duty death in 1966. And they're going to memorialize him in 2025.
Deservedly so.
Yeah, and I'm glad they're doing it, but that's why, like, the firefighter registry, I think, is so important. Put down, don't play. What do you play on the phone now? It's not Candy Crush, whatever the game is, or stay off social media for 10 minutes and just do yourself that service to put those those details in, because there's a high likelihood that something's going to happen down the road in his career. And I say career, obviously, whether it's full-time, part-time, completely volunteer. But you have to protect yourself and your family. And that's one way to do that. And, just keep that log. You keep the written log, but you also keep that national database so we can really look at things. And just like the guys in Worcester, we talked about it the other night. They never wanted to meet. They've met. And you know what? We don't know how many guys have survived a fire or a Mayday scenario or utilize those self-survival, self-rescue skills that they learned here in Worcester, or because of the folks that started teaching here and took that nationally. But we know it's worked. We know there's guys that are alive today because of what was learned here in Worcester, right? So born from that tragedy is success and firefighters who continue their career. And it's the same thing, on that other spectrum, whether it's mental health and BTS and suicide, or the cancer side.
Right. And that's, I think, the public often sees us through rose-colored glasses and that we're wearing the red capes. But the fact is, even who wears the red cape has a problem with kryptonite.
Yeah.
So all the superpowers jump buildings in a single bound and all that stuff. But when kryptonite comes into play, Superman can't do jack. And we have to remember, that for those of us who really dedicate ourselves, again, no matter what level you're, vocation, avocation, but we have to remember that we have that obligation, number one, to our family and to our community that we've taken the oath for, to take the best care of ourselves that we can. One of the things we've seen a real slowdown for, thank goodness, is it really would really make me angry when I would see a selfie taken in front of a house that was just burnt down. People are out of their homes. They have no place to go. They're waiting for the Red Cross to come up. And we have a bunch of, 8 or 9 firefighters doing a selfie with a big smile on their face. How do you do that with the family 15 feet away from you, sitting on their stoop because they've lost everything they had?
Yeah.
We can't save every structure. We know that. We do our best, but sometimes it bites back at us. And we have the Worcester, we had the Boston, the couple of the other instances in Boston where a typical fire, everyone thought it was going to be a typical fire, turned out not to be. Turned out to be something different. We weren't expecting, we weren't prepared, and it takes a toll. And there's no glory in dying in the line of duty if it could be prevented. And I think we still look at it almost as a heroic thing for a firefighter to die in the course of doing his or her job. That doesn't help the family. They're still without their mother, their father, their sister, their brother, their child, whatever the case is, who made the selfless decision to serve in fire or serve in law enforcement or serve in EMS. One of the reasons why we started the nonprofit in October of 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, was because we were seeing so many of our brothers and sisters getting ill from just doing their job of patients back and forth, taking care of them, bringing them to the hospitals, the clinics and stuff like that. And they weren't even prepared to defend themselves biologically. And so we felt, Andy, Nick, and I said, we got to do something to help our brothers and sisters. We can't just let them fall by the wayside, and nobody's doing anything because there were hundreds, if not thousands, who lost their lives in those 2.5 years that probably did not have to.
Yeah.
And I think we have to remember that our egos cannot outgrow our hearts. I think that's the way I heard it one time. We can't let our egos outmaneuver our hearts. And it's difficult. Both of us have been at numerous firefighter funerals, and you don't see anybody smiling, you know?
Yeah.
But the question is, are we learning from it? You know, as the old saying goes, and you know this very well, I think we've talked about this before, the two things that firefighters dislike the most are change and status quo. So how do we grow? You know, hopefully we learn from, even if we weren't there, from what you've shared with us today about the Worcester. I will say that there are many people your age and, you know, even up to me, who clearly remember those key tragic occurrences, even if it wasn't our fire. But when you learned about, you know, I had been out of the fire service because of the injury, but in 2000, we didn't really think about anything else. We remember this instance in Worcester, but what about the 3 Boston firefighters we lost several years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And the Chicago accident about 5 or 6 years ago, and LA not too long ago, 2 apparatus collided. We can't be in such a hurry to do the job that we don't get ourselves there safely and take care of ourselves properly on the scene. And I'm not quite sure how we can bridge that gap a little bit better.
You know, I mean, I think that's the $1 million question, right? Is that what they call it? You know, and I mean, there's a wealth of resources. There's more information out, and maybe that's part of the problem. You know, we've had that internal discussion. Is there too much information out there? Again, in the day of digital content, there's plenty of great information out there. There's plenty of misinformation out there, and then there's plenty of just bad information. And I'm not saying we get it right every day, right?
Right.
I mean, you know, we've had content that we thought was great, only to find out that, yeah, man, that was an epic fail. We've had speakers who have taught for us, who come recommended, or, you know, hey, that's a great topic, great description, and it's a bomb. You know, you can't know everybody. There's really no way to vet everybody, especially nowadays, right? And COVID was an interesting time. A lot of experts came out of the woodwork at that point, and I'm not trying to knock them. I think a lot of them saw an opportunity to grow at that time, because there was no in-person events, and they could create that social media presence and whatnot. But, you know, at the end of the day, you still have to do your research, right? And I think, again, as a society, we've gotten kind of lazy, right? We don't do the research that we did, right? Like, we were talking about it. My brother and I were talking about this the other day. I have a high school report that's due. What do? I go to the library. I get the books. Then I go to the encyclopedia. I come home. I get the encyclopedia, fact checked everything, right? Now it's there, and you assume it's truth. You know, and my brother and I share these, you know, videos all the time, and it's fascinating. As our parents are getting older and having a lot of health issues, you know, we're watching these videos. It's opening our eyes. But then the question is this real, right? And then we start doing some more of this research, and I think that's part of the problem. There's a lot of information out there that we just don't know if it's valid information or if it's misinformation. But then there still has to be that desire to learn, you know. And I think on the volunteer side, you know, because everybody's forced to work multiple jobs in this day and age, it's tough to have that extra time to dedicate. I mean, listen, I was lucky. I worked at Firehouse, and if I said to my boss, hey, I want to go to a seminar, you know, John Salk is teaching today over in Farmingdale. Yep, no problem. You know, when I worked at the hardware store, my second job when I moved back to Long Island as a I think 19-year-old, call came in, myself and one of the other guys usually left, went on the call and came back. Part-time, when I was working for the paper, I worked for a landscaper who was in the volleys, and a run came in. We all jumped in that pickup truck. We went on a run. we could cut grass till 9 o'clock at night. We would if we had a call that came in. That doesn't happen anymore, right? The career side, they're mandated by so much, whether it's on the EMS side or personnel training and everything else, and then just the sheer number of runs that the time is limited. But I think you still have to think about it, and even if it's your day off, whether you're again getting paid or not, drive through that community, drive through your district, and look at things, and then have that conversation when you get in. I had a great conversation one night with a friend of mine. He was really frustrated. He's a guy that loves the fire service, just absolutely eats it up day in and day out. Career guy, never did the volunteer side, never did a place where he could volunteer, but he's on the career side. When he found out that I worked at Firehouse, we started chatting, and he'd send me stuff all the time, and he'd ask me, do you have anything on this and that? And he ate everything up. Buildings that he didn't even have in his city, he wanted to know information about because he had heard a conversation someplace. And we had the conversation after one of his shifts. He was frustrated. He had a really good crew, but he's like, I don't think they're in the game. So I said, okay, so you're leaving, right? When you're here for 24, you go home for 48. I said, when do you leave the firehouse? He goes, around 11 o'clock. He's an officer, so he's got to do some paperwork, hangs out with the crew coming in the morning, make sure everything's squared away, make sure the rig's in good shape. It's funny, right? He came in, he checked the rig as the officer. He left, he checked the rig for the ongoing shift just to make sure they didn't miss anything. But I said, when does your driver think about it? I said, when does your driver think about it next? And he goes, I think when he leaves, he drives the street for a little bit. And then, that's that. Said, okay. When does he think about it on his way back in? He goes, probably when he hits the exit on the highway, comes in and, drives the streets and looks to see what, where there's a new pothole or where there's a new bump, something to avoid as he's swinging that rig through the streets. So what about, the guy behind you in the back? I don't think he thinks about it at all. So I think when he's here, he's not thinking about it. And when he goes home, he's not thinking about it. All right, how about the guy behind the driver? He's a legacy. I think he was, third generation, So he's probably talking to his dad. His grandfather had passed, department legend had passed. He said he probably stops thinking about 10 o'clock, about 2 hours, 3 hours after he leaves the station. Probably thinks about it once or twice throughout the 48 hours. And then he thinks about it that morning when he wakes up. He starts thinking about it. I said, but look at you. You're going to go home. You're going to take care of the dogs, do whatever it is you're going to do. Then you're going to sit down and read the magazine. You're going to go about your day. Your wife comes home. You're going to have dinner. You're going to go online real quick and see what's going on in the fire news. I said, you're a one of four in that crew that again, I'm not saying you have to be plugged in 24/7, especially now with the advent of smartphones and everything else where we're overwhelmed with information. But you have to be a student, and I think that's a problem. And it's interesting, going back to Worcester, right? In 2000, I came up here for the first safety and survival seminar. And I was talking to a guy that has become a friend since. And, I said, well, when do you guys train? I used to hang out with them all the time. I said, when do you guys train? They go, we all went to the academy. I'm like, you guys have been on 15 years. They didn't take part in training. And I'm like, here it is. You have a international tragedy not that far from where you are. And you guys haven't started training for what? I said, okay. And that was that wake up moment. Like, not everybody's like me. And I mean, again, listen, I was blessed to be able to have this job and everything else. And to be able to soak that information up. I know I was blessed, and I'm blessed to have been blessed. But it's an interesting crossroads because, maybe it's that typical crew. One guy of the three eats the fire service up. One guy likes the fire service, and one guy's there, whether it's for the paycheck, for the pension, for the jacket, for the shirt, whatever it is. But their motivation isn't real. Their motivation is something completely different than the whole purpose of being on that fire truck day in and day out.
Right. I go back to those times in 2002. I was doing another show. It was actually through radio. Locally, we'd do it Sunday nights from 5 to 7, and it was went up to, I think it was HME had a system up there. They could put it out on the internet. So the name of the show was Burning Issues. My good friend Frank was he was a paramedic and PIO for Boca Raton Fire, and he said, "Look, I'm going to FDIC, I'm going to have a booth. Do you want to come and be there with me? And I said, yeah, I guess. He goes, what do you mean you guess? Because this would be great for us. We had done some local stuff together. And I said, yeah, well, after, 7 months ago, I don't think the same way I did before 9/11 happened. But we went there, and it was an amazing opportunity. I felt blessed I was able to go there because this was the first major conference after 9/11. And I'm not, when I go to conferences in my field of work, my regular field of work, I'd be as kind of nice as and polite and have a good time with some of the friends, but I didn't gauge myself by what they were doing, what I wanted to do. And yet in 2002, it was a very somber situation. It was amazing. People came together. And folks, if you don't think firefighters cry, well, I do because I wear my emotions on my sleeve. But I can tell you at that conference, and I'm sure subsequent to that, the next firehouse conference, we all had the same thing. It wasn't a lot of music and joviality and stuff like that. We were sitting there talking to each other, learning what we need to learn, but inside our hearts were still aching for what had happened. And I think we've lost sight of that. We lost sight of those sacrifices that our brothers in New York did.
Mhm.
I remember that in the film that came out when I think it was Chief Pfeiffer said, listen, guys, they're looking up at the building, and he says, this is not going to be an easy one. So if anybody wants to, back off going, he goes, I respect you 10,000%. This is not going to be a job for everybody. And yet, all 5 other firefighters climbed up the stairs with him. And the chief was the only one who made it back. That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough, and I think we need some reverse education for new firefighters. I think we should be telling them about the Coconut Grove fire, the Chicago parochial school fire, in South Carolina, the fire at the mattress store. I think those should be part of the teachings that we give to our brothers and sisters coming up in the academies. You just can't teach them to do a knot, how to lift an axe, and how to adjust a nozzle. They need to learn where they come from and who brought them to where the fire service is today, but what they went through to bring that to us, to allow us to still be able to do this job that we love. And I think we're missing out on that. I think that should be a part of basically every rookie school. Has to be history of who we are and what we do. And I don't know if that'll fall on interested ears or it's going to fall on ears that don't care. But the fact of the matter is those who paved that way for us and made the ultimate sacrifice should be remembered at all times.
Agree.
So
And I had a really interesting thing, Steve. I was visiting a friend a couple months ago, and I had a National Fallen Firefighter shirt. It was a shirt that I bought last year Memorial Weekend. We were, it was raining, and had every piece of clothing you needed except for some sort of cover to get between the buildings for this. I mean, we had a fierce rainstorm, so I bought a NFFF Memorial pullover. And I wear that all the time now. It's especially in Texas, right? It's just a perfect weight to wear on a cool evening. And I just happen to have this on. The guy goes, "Oh, do you know anything about the foundation?" Explain. Yeah, I did. And so we were chatting, and the guys were all getting ready for dinner. And this guy had about 20, just under 30 years, 28, 29 years. He says, "Oh yeah, I've done some work. I was a family escort." I said, "Oh, like, how'd you get involved?" He goes, "Well, I started as an escort for two of our deaths, and he goes, the third one somebody else did, but I would go back every year and volunteer." And I remember the lieutenant kind of looks over and he goes, "What do you mean deaths?" And he says, "Oh, we've had 3 line of duty deaths here." And it was shocking that, I mean, the other members, they were fairly, I mean, the lieutenant had, probably 15, 16 years on. The other guys didn't have any whiskers at all. And they didn't even know that the department had lost members. And, I known that because when I walked through the hall, I saw the plaque and I took a quick look. I remember two of the incidents. I remember seeing them. And it's like, how can you be an officer? How can you be leading these people? And I'm not putting them at fault. I don't know the department. I don't know their history. I don't know their culture. But even my volunteer department, we lost a member. I was in elementary school. A guy ended up having a fatal heart attack, fell off the back of a rig, had a head injury and died secondary to the heart attack. And I would tell people all the time, like, well, don't forget Mike Mush and Ross. Well, who's that? And we had a plaque in the back of the station. But you know what? Like, I realized at that point that no service was done at some point during that rookie year. We should talk about it. And it was interesting because until the time I joined, most every chief had been a lifelong resident of that community. And the chiefs around my time and after me, most of them had moved in from other communities. So they only knew the department from about the time they joined. And some of the chiefs had no idea that they had lost somebody. Now, granted, the death had been 15, 20 years before. But you should know that, and again, like, maybe that's something you put in your annual dinner banquet program. You always remember the people who died that year, but if you've had somebody who's died in line of duty, no matter if the cause of their death, that should be something that's remembered. And you know what? I mean, it's interesting because that death actually sparked a whole completely unrelated. But the truck had stalled right after the guy had the heart attack and fallen off. The truck stalled, and they went through a whole driver's training program unrelated to the death, but they just happened to have that. So it was a heart attack, but something was still born from that tragedy, right? Some educational process was created from then, and that educational process is still used. But the death that kind of led to that was completely overlooked.
And that's a shame. And I think you see it probably even more than I do, but you see that a lot of these new men and women coming into the fire service, they're hungry for what they want to learn because of everything they've heard about learning to be a firefighter. But if we don't give them the background of who we are and what we do and who came here before us, that allows us to become a firefighter in that same house, I think that's where we're dropping the ball. Is that this should be, whether it's a career department, volunteer part, whatever, there should be, in the first couple of weeks, there should be a lecture or two about the sacrifices that members of this department made before you even came here. Maybe you were even too young. Maybe you were 5 years old when it happened, but now you're here in this house, and this is our special house, and you need to know what goes on in this house and what has gone on in this house. And I think that, to me, that's as important. I guess maybe it's, being an educator for over 60 years, to me, this is something that shouldn't be an issue to bring up. This should be part of the indoctrination as we welcome those new men and women who want to become members of the fire service in their communities. But let them know that you don't just drop a seed in the dirt and you get a nice big bush coming out of it. We have to set the tone of what is it like from the day we start, and what happens to some of us who do everything right to the best of our ability, but then it was just that one other thing that fell between the cracks and took the life of 1, 2, 3 of our brothers and sisters. If we don't remember where we come from, then how do we know where we're going to be going?
100% correct.
Yeah.
You're 100% correct. Absolutely.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. If you're watching the video, you're not going to see anything different. If you're listening to the audio version, you know that we're going to take a break. There'll be a couple of PSAs for both the fire service and for you out there, listeners and viewers. And then we'll be right back with our guest, Peter Mathews. And we're going to be talking about the birth of Fire Fusion that happened this past month in November of 2024. And I'm interested to hear, because I've heard a few things on social media and stuff like that, but I want to get it from you and what your goals were and how we met them and what else can we do and things like that. So we'll be right back with Peter Mathews right after these words. As always, please stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force. I am very proud and humbled to have as my guest is Peter Mathews. He is the editor-in-chief of Firehouse Magazine and conference leader. And speaking of conference leader, we had a new conference this year from Firehouse.
Yeah. So this year we rolled out Fire Fusion. Last year was the last year of Firehouse Expo after 40 years of providing, training to firefighters on everything fire service. This year we rolled out Fire Fusion, and our company kind of tasked us with finding something new, right? There's so many events out there that cover tactics and leadership. And they really wanted us to have an opportunity to bring something new to the forefront. My boss, Bill McRae, when he came here, he said, "Hey, man, we're gonna roll out a technology thing. I love technology." And I said, "Well, hold up, buddy. You don't know much about the fire service. The fire service is very slow to adapt to technology, and again, rightfully so. There's a lot of reasons why, right? We still hear nightmare stories every day about some program being implemented only for it to not work, and places are down on their technology for a long period of time." But last few years, technology has grown so much. There's so much of it being used in the fire service, right? Of course, AI came out about a year ago, and at first I thought AI is just a souped up version of Google, right? It's just a lazy person's version of Google. It's like Siri and Google married, and they just give you a lot of information. And like I said earlier, right? Sometimes there's misinformation out there. I actually saw something on LinkedIn the other day. It was very interesting. Guy says, I put into Chat GPT, draw a picture of me about what you know. And it was pretty cool. It had all his life accomplishments. So I was sitting at my parents the other night. I think it was Thanksgiving night. It's like, I'm going to try that. I put it in, and in about 10 seconds, it spit out an image of somebody sitting at a desk with a typewriter. Again, I know I'm a little bit older, but it had a typewriter, somebody taking, with a notepad, a phone on the desk, fire scene in the background, and a camera. And I was like, holy crap, 8 seconds, it's that fast that it knew everything I'm involved with. That kind of changed my perspective a lot on AI. But going back to the conference, we wanted to look at how technology is impacting the fire service, right? I think the one thing is we can't embrace technology until it's ready for the fire service. And I agree 100%. But you don't know it until you try it, right? Somebody has to be that department that gets involved. And that's one of the things we tried to select was agencies that have proven that technology can work. I mean, we did work with a lot of vendors as well. Some spoke as well as, visited or exhibited in the marketplace. But there's so much that we wanted to cover. And actually the event, we're trying to keep it to a smaller, more intimate event. I think that's where people go home with a much better experience instead of walking through hundreds of booths and thousands of people trying to get, FaceTime with the people they want to see. We wanted this to be much more intimate. We had food for you, so you never had to leave the event center. Everything was there that you needed. Coffee throughout the course of the day, drinks, meals, happy hour type event in the evening. And it really created some good conversations. It created some really good opportunities for vendors to almost, have the expert insight that they needed to develop their products or grow their products. So Fire Fusion took place in Charleston, and people said, why Charleston? And, when we were looking for a city, we wanted to find some place, that's a destination, that's different. It's not your big convention city. And that's the thing, we were at this performing arts center. And my first time I walked in, I was a little hesitant. I said, I don't know if this is going to work. By the time I left my site visit, I was like, man, this is going to be really cool. It's completely different. It's something people will talk about the center as much as they'll talk about the event, as much as they'll talk about the city. So we started talking, and I talked to Chief Curia from Charleston, and actually he had to keep it quiet from David Griffin. I felt really bad, but as we started exploring it, I said, you guys are kind of a model city for having implemented technology, right? So you have the Sofa Superstore fire in 2007. As the entire fire service and organizations looked at Charleston in the microscope, they had thermal imagers. They didn't use it. They had radio channel, they had one radio channel for the entire city. All these things that kind of involve technology. And I'm like, that's the city that is, part of that saying, what the phoenix rises from the ashes, right? They now work with their mutual aid partners, thanks to the communication center setting up this, auto aid policy. They share policies and procedures online. They train together online. They have the Tom Carr Command Center, Incident Command Lab. They continue to grow, even in their antiquated, and I say antiquated, but I love them, right? They're 100-plus-year-old stations. They have technology. They've been able to do the best they can with what they've got. So they have station alerting and everything else they need. So it kind of became like, hey, this is a good place for the fire service to come learn about the growth of the department, but also growth of technology in the fire service. And a few of the things that we did, we had a class at the Incident Command Simulation Lab at one of their stations, which is actually just adjacent to the Sofa Superstore fire site. We had guided tours by David Griffin and TJ Axon, who were both on the first in engine for the fire. We had a walking leadership tour. Again, when you think history, you think Charleston. When you think leadership, a lot of leadership decisions are made. Even the Citadel is there. So you've got all these things tied together. And I was like, man, this is the perfect location to launch this event. And now we just have to get the fire service to understand that it's okay to talk about technology, embrace it. And we had some really good ambassadors. And yeah, I mean, we had a goal. 450 attendees was kind of the goal for our event. We didn't want to be so big that you'd be overwhelmed, whether you're an exhibitor or we call it a marketplace, so a vendor or an attendee. We wanted you to have time with those vendors, and that's kind of the model. And I would say it's a success. We had a lot to learn, right? I mean, again, we kind of went into it not really sure how some of these things would kind of fit together in the mold of the event. We've learned a lot of lessons, and we're going to look forward to putting those together next year. We're just about to announce the dates. It'll be in October 2025 back in Charleston. But it was great. And I'll tell you, I spent the majority of the last half of 2023 and 2024 learning about technology and uncovered a lot of stuff it's not even expensive, right? Like there's some basic stuff that you can get and take your department 6 levels up, whether it's incident command technology, whether it's accountability, whether it's in-station technology, just record keeping, right? Again, the legal liabilities and the implications there. I mean, that's, talk about investing, in your members. That's a key component of it. So there's been just so much to learn, and looking forward to sharing a lot of that with our folks next year.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I really like that I think this was the 8th year, if I'm not mistaken, is the station design
Yes.
program. I think, first of all, I eat that up. First thing I do is when that comes out, or I downloaded it just the other day from the website. But to me, I find that fascinating because I just think there's more to learn that we can share, talk about, debate politely, but I think it provides this wonderful opportunity. As you said, I've been to several firehouse conferences, which I loved. I'm still, when I get around all those apparatus, I'm still that 5-year-old kid who begged my dad to take me down to the station right near our home, where I think they had a 1954 think, I'm not sure what brand it was at that time, but they came back. We had a little fire in our backyard. Some kids had been playing out there, and they came there and put out, and I walked down to the engineer. Everybody's in the woods looking where the fire was. And I walked down to the engine, and I'm, like I said, 5, 6 years old. And I look at him and I say, "Are you a firefighter? Fireman? No, fireman is what I said." And he goes, "Yeah, yeah." Why? He goes, "Your job is so cool." He says, "Well, this is an easy job for us today, but we have tough ones too." And of course, Framingham had the big Framingham to Ashland, the big Ashland oil fire that happened back in the 60s also, which was, I think there were several fatalities from that. And they had departments from all around the area. We really didn't have AFFF back in those days in regular departments. We were just putting wet stuff on the red stuff. But I think that seeing what you can do through it, not just changing the venue, because I don't think the venue is as important as what you offer. And reading all the stuff about fire fusion, and I know we joked last time you were on that I was going to try my best to get there, but it wasn't to be this time. But I was fascinated by the fact, as I read more and more, that it wasn't, I hate to use the term, but it wasn't going to be just a frat party. It was going to be a learning event. And that's where you get I think the cream of the crop, who say, no, it's not going to be like the old conferences we had. We're changing up, bringing it to a more modern situation, helping you know what's ahead of you, what tools you have now, what tools we used in the past, and where we find with them. And I think that does a much greater service to the attendees than just a giant, 50,000, person stadium. And, 40% of that's taken up with, apparatus of all types and things. But that part is good too. Not just because, a lot of us still like to see what apparatus that other departments use, but we learn from those experiences as well. So I remember seeing one time one of the rib boats, and I just thought, man, that's so much easier for a fire department to have. We did, even in North Carolina, we had a couple of ice rescues we had to do. First year, we didn't have much than a John boat, just a little, metal boat. And then the chief started bringing in some more stuff that would make it safer for us and things like that. And I did everything I could to learn more from that. And I think that instead of, as much as I enjoyed those big conferences back in the day, I felt that a lot of that was feeding pablum. But I thought, as I kept reading about fire fusion, I said, this is a professional conference now. This is really going to be a conference. So where people can come here, you have great presenters, you have the opportunity to, show off apparatus, special things that are going to help in the firehouse, new tools for the apparatus, for an engine company, for a heavy rescue company. And I think I was really excited to see how that was going to come out, because that's where I would have caught, if I had the ability to go, I would go for that because I want to learn more. I don't have to hang out and get drunk with a bunch of people and then, stay up to 2 o'clock in the morning, puke my guts out, then have to be up for an 8 o'clock call for something. So I think it was a great idea, and I'm glad to hear that for the most part, you were really pleased with it.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think the events, it's important, right? I think, especially with the stresses of the job, you do have to, have some of that downtime and cut loose and relax. And again, this event was designed to have some of that networking on site. Again, when you have a large event, and you have a couple hundred people gathered in one place in the evening, that's great. for what we're trying to do, again, technology is a lot of discussions, right? You want that, you want to have that honest and open discussion. And when you're in a loud bar, that's not necessarily the place to have that. And we had, in the evenings, we had folks break out for a couple of things. We didn't really have any formal events in the evening because we knew people wanted to see Charleston and see what was going on. We've got some plans for some things we could do next year. But yeah, I mean, the reality is we want networking to take place, but we want that engagement between the firefighters who are attending, the speakers, and the folks in the vendor marketplace. That was the goal, and I'd say it was very successful. I mean, yeah, just like anything else, nothing is 100% excellent all the time, right? But there's the good thing is everything that wasn't marked as excellent, and it really wasn't that much. For the fire service, which is surprising actually, but it's easy fixes, right? And get a little bit more involvement from those parties to see how we can improve that. But there was so many cool things, like there's two things I'd really like to highlight. Unfortunately, I didn't get in, even though there was only at most 3 sessions going on at the same time. The one class I missed that I've heard a ton of feedback was obviously, and I can't even mention Andy, right? Andy Storns talked about thermal imaging. How can you not have a tech conference without Andy, and then without Andy and tech, thermal imaging? But we had 2 guys from the Illinois Fire Service Institute join us, and they talked about how they've implemented technology at their campus, but also as they travel around the country. And again, I didn't have a chance to sit in a class. I didn't even make it to the room. They had a good turnout, and a friend of mine was in there, and he actually is involved with a college program. And his college brought 5 people out to see what was going on, but specific to that class. And here it was 3 weeks later, and he and I were chatting about it and just doing some follow-up. I like to talk to these guys. I know there'll be people in every classroom that I call, like, hey, which session did you go to? What do you think? You get that candid feedback. They're people I trust for honest feedback. They're not going to blow smoke. They're going to give me feedback. Hey, this was good. This was bad. And he said, hey, man, we just met. They've already implemented 4 things that they learned at Fire Fusion. And I'm like, are you kidding me? He goes, no. And he goes, and it's cost us $100. That's it, $100. But it's these websites, right? And the one thing that was fascinating, right? Going back to those conversations of being uncomfortable earlier, was nobody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, right? And I think it's even more challenging now in a society where everybody messages. So they said they have a QR code. Now, some of our instructors have done that in the past. Eddie Tracy was great. When we had Eddie Tracy at Firehouse Expo, he'd throw up a question, how many of you have heard of this event, or how many of you know this, or how many of you have done this? Because, again, people just don't want to raise their hands, and I respect that. But if you really want to learn, if you want to take the most out of it you can, you have to engage. So he said that they create this QR code for every class. And that allows them to send in questions, anonymous questions. It allows them to do polls and everything else. So, this college, they came back, and the next week they had bought the program. It's $60 a month, and they're using it in all their classes. And they said the engagement rate in in the classes they're trying it in has like tripled or quadrupled, which is great, right? So there's that. A lot of great discussions on AI. We had Marcus Clay come from Panasonic. He was a law enforcement official as well as a firefighter. He talked about AI. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it's scary, but it's cool, but it's worrisome, but it's going to evolve and change a lot of what we do, mostly on the good side, right? Nothing's ever 100% great, especially when it's technical. There's always that little uncertainty. There was some really good insight from him. But then we had Mike Leo from FDNY. And, I was even torn, like, do we have FDNY come when they've got unlimited resources, whether it's personnel, money, and I shouldn't say unlimited, but they've got a wealth of resources available to them at any time. And he did a program about their drones and their robotics. But what really blew my mind was a tailboard talk he did, 15-minute session, and he spoke about their program in the Rockaways, like I mentioned earlier, where the plane crashed in 2001. They have a program during the summer where they monitor the Rockaways, and the Rockaways is on the south part of Queens. It's the Atlantic Ocean. It's just the beaches are covered. They are covered with people all summer. It's one of the few like true beaches in New York City, and it seems like every weekend there's a fatality, a drowning, a shark attack, whatever it is. So they started working with the lifeguards, and FDNY now has drones. I'm sorry, unmanned aerial systems, and they fly. And so what helmet cams have done for firefighters training, what body cams have done for police officers, whether it's a liability issue or training, these drone videos he's showing us, and they've got a drone up over the swimmer who is caught in a rip current, and they can see it, they can watch it, they know where he is, they can watch the lifeguards get out there, and they actually now have the ability to swoop down to this person and drop essentially like a buoy or a life preserver to give that person the chance to survive. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, again, it's water rescue, right? It's Baywatch, but they've evolved that technology to go that far. And it was a trial period. Again, the buoys really didn't work in the beginning. They were having some issues with it, but they fine-tuned it, and they have saved people from drowning. They've spotted sharks, ahead of people being attacked. This was after they had a whole group of that. So again, when you talk about all hazards, right? And again, fire departments can't do everything, even though that's what everybody expects of them. At the reality, you just can't do it all. You can't be health and human services and fire and public safety and, backup legal support when the police can't show up. And you can't be, raising the people's children and fixing everybody's bicycle and unlocking every car and changing everybody's batteries. But like something like that, I mean, you talk about technology coming full circle. Not only is it identifying the problem before it's a problem, you can now warn people with it, and then you can drop something with a drone to prevent that tragedy that you're about to witness unfold before the lifeguards get there. And I'll tell you that it was a 15-minute session. I think he went about 9 minutes, and I walked out and I said, I remember when I used to work for the New York Post, we always had a photographer every summer weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We always had a photographer in the Rockaways because we knew there'd be a drowning. We knew there'd be a story there, right? And the good news is those stories are going to be less and less because of this technology. And this was born from a conversation of, hey, we're having this issue. We're having these drownings. And I mean, listen, I live in Texas, right? Man-made lakes all over the place. And every Sunday night, Monday morning on the news, a person drowned. There's one lake, I swear, like you're playing Russian roulette going into this lake because somebody drowns in it every weekend. Yeah. So to be able to take this technology on 6 different levels and save lives is amazing. So that really, like, that was the first day. That was one of the first sessions. And for me, when that group of speakers was done, I was like, holy crap, we're on to the right thing. We are putting together content, that most every department can utilize. And again, they might not have the full suite. If it's an incident command, they might only have 3 portions of that program, but those 3 portions are going to save somebody's life. Right. And that's what it's all about, right?
Exactly.
And it's going to make accountability easier. Now, listen, again, not everything is there. I mean, and that's, like I mentioned earlier, you really have to do your research, right? We had some terrific providers there. There were some providers who weren't there, and we know they'll be there next year because they've already reached out to us. But there's been a lot of conversations. There's stuff that we had no idea even existed that our attendees talked to us about and said, hey, you need to have them here next year. So the reality is, technology, like it or not, is going to have a huge role in the fire service in the next 10 years. And you know what? If you want to naysay it, that's fine. But, you really do have to learn it because it's coming. And it's not going to take away jobs, right? Like, that conversation came up. Well, there's firefighting robots. They're going to take away firefighting jobs. They're not going to take away jobs, right? There's plenty of stuff that robots can do, but there's also plenty of things that robots can't do.
Right.
And you still need to have that human element of it too. Can a car, can a robot unlock a car? I'm sure it can, to be honest. I'm sure you could probably 3D print something at a car that, whatever. But if you utilize it, I think it's going to improve your safety. It's going to improve the accountability aspect of it. It's going to give you that intelligence. Again, it's something as simple as a thermal imaging. Look at where thermal imaging was when I joined here 25 years ago and where it is now. You know, you were lucky if you had one department in your county that had a helmet mounted thermal imaging, or in your state. And now you can have one in your car.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
it is. It's amazing. And it's good to see that new technology, both electronic, mechanical product that we can use in our work is always going to, yes, as we joked in the first segment, that, you know, the two things that firefighters detest more is change or status quo. So they have to, at some point, they got to bend and understand that there are new things coming. And I, I could probably say that if you went back to firefighters who were in there maybe last of their 20, 25 years, and you ask them, well, has the job changed since you came on as a rookie? I'll guarantee you they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
And they weren't able to do things back then that they're able to do today. And for people today, they're going to, in a couple of years, they're going to have more developments that's going to make the job safer, new technology, better communications. Now, you know, Chief Charlie Werner with drone responders, but he's always been, when he's been a guest here, we always talk about the latest technology for the fire service. And I just saw the article, I think it was about a month ago, about now the XYZ coordinates. So battalion chief or whoever the incident commander is can know exactly where a firefighter is. And he says, I'm stuck. I'm not quite sure where I am. Well, with that tab and the receiver down at the buggy, they'll know exactly what floor, where they are on it, left, right, north, south, east, and west. And that's going to be a big change so that we can hopefully prevent losing some of our brave men and women, because a little bit of technology, it doesn't bother you when there's a little button sewed on your bunker gear, but that's going to tell the incident commander exactly where you are and what you need.
Yeah.
And that's key. You know, sometimes, listen, we hear Maydays being called, but we don't necessarily know. That firefighter often says, I don't know where I am. That's why I'm calling them Mayday. I don't know how to move out. But now, with this kind of technology, there'll be a better chance of the IC or his or her designee to help find this firefighter exactly where they are and get help to them as quickly as possible. And I think
Yeah.
we can't be afraid of technology, because a lot of us, even today, older people like me, still love technology today, a lot of it. You know, I started working with computers in 1983, started building them, repairing them, software, putting software on board. Then I got into malware and all that stuff. And I still do it for some of my clients who need me once in a while. But I loved that part of it because I had to do that. I had to learn consistently. And that's the key. And I hope that we can, with the way you've changed Fire Fusion and the good reports you're getting from it, from those who attended there, that'll catch on with more. Do people say, hey, you know, I didn't even realize it was going to be like that when it first brought. I want to get there at the next conference that they have there, because I want to be there. I want to see that. And that's, you know, you wet them with whet the appetite with a little bit of candy, and you could have wonderful results from something like that. And that's the key.
Agree. You know, and again, going back to the coordination, right, or the coordinates. So that was the one thing, you know, and it was brought up. I brought up a couple of times, and it was really a good learning experience for me at Fire Fusion, right? But this fire here was kind of the catalyst for the lack of the ability to track firefighters, right? And again, now you can have, you can track. I mean, we did it with my parents as they were getting older. My father's dementia started setting in. We had air tags, and I'm in Texas, and my brother's on Long Island, and we know where my parents are at all times, right? Because they didn't even know they had the air tags in the car.
Right.
But you can find somebody on their phone, right? You can, I mean, even on like Snapchat, you can look at where all your friends are at in a map, and yet you can't find a firefighter. Now, of course, yeah, you can find their phone, but does Stephen Smith share his location with his chief every day? Probably not. But again, once you go into some of these buildings, that connectivity is lost. But it's been 25 years of the discussion, and we're literally just getting there.
Right.
And I think, I think some parts of the fire service didn't take it as serious as others. And again, listen, if you're primarily responding to one story, two-story wood frame homes, that connectivity issue isn't going to be there. But you look at what's being built, right? I mean, even by my folks, there's a lot of big box stores going in, right? The Amazon warehouses, the storage, I don't know why every community has 25, storage rental unit buildings anymore. Something's going on. I'm not sure what it is, but we're not going to go there today again. But you're having all these substantial buildings with heavy duty materials being built, or at least, that metal is now, breaking that connectivity between you and the people in the street when you're inside the building. So it is still important to be able to have that. And we're finally getting there, but a quarter of a century to finally really have something solid, and how many millions of dollars were thrown into it, but they just couldn't make it work with the technology that's out there.
Right. Right. Well, once we stop the recording, I have one other thing I'm going to pass by you, but I think, you took the risk of changing the conference that people had been at for over, 25 years. And what I'm hearing from you is that it worked. It
Yeah.
worked, I know when you first mentioned it to me a year ago, I had my doubts. I said, "Oh boy, I liked those couple of conferences I was at, and they were terrific and a lot of fun and a lot of learning and stuff." And I was saying, "Oh boy, I hope this works." But I am thrilled to hear that in its debut, it was an overall success.
Thank you. And it was, again, I think hesitancy anytime there's change, right? But really it was, overall, it was a very, very positive experience for all of us. Whether it's the firehouse staff or, even the vendors and the attendees. And at the end of the day, that feedback is of utmost importance, right? And I'm grateful to have had that feedback so that we can grow the event moving forward. But all in all, man, it was really good. It was really good.
That's great to hear. And you know what? Good news in the fire service is really good news.
Amen.
That's right.
Amen.
Well, Peter, again, I thank you so much for your friendship and being a guest several times on the show. It means a great deal to me, and I know our listeners and viewers are going to want to learn also from you on this podcast, and we'll get it out as quickly as I can edit it and get it out there. And but I think this was good because we had to look back to yesterday, and now we finish it looking into tomorrow. And I think that's a good way to go through life, is remember where we came from, know where you are today, and have a pretty good idea of where you're going to be tomorrow. That's a pretty good way to live your life.
That's a great way to wrap up. And yeah, I mean, again, there's certainly plenty of unknowns that we all deal with on a daily basis. But that's what those life experiences are for. And that's why we always need to be doing a little bit more research, right?
Exactly.
This happened, but why? How do we get here? And Steve, again, I just want to say thanks to you and to all the work that you guys do with Five Alarm Task Force. Again, it's not just a podcast and some guys having great conversations. It's the giving back to the fire service, right? And that's what the fire service is about, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, taking care of everybody. I know you guys have done so much work to provide financial support to organizations and really to the members of the fire service. We're all, it seems that everybody in their family is facing some unprecedented need. And I just want to say thanks on behalf of all the folks that you guys have helped out. Um, you know, the family, the fire service family is very strong with the support that comes from Fire Alarm Task Force. So thank you for all that you guys do.
Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for those kind words. Folks, this is going to be the end of the video. And those of you listening to the audio, there'll be a little bit more coming up on the audio version. But my sincere thanks to Peter Mathews, who's done a yeoman's job as the editor of Firehouse Magazine and taking over the conferences and sharing a couple of hours with us today. Peter, to you and yours, best wishes for a very happy, joyous, and safe holiday season. And I'll keep your parents in my prayers too.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. Thank you to you. And again, just thanks for all the work that you do, and looking forward to what you guys roll out in 2025. I'm looking forward to some of your next podcasts and your guests.
We're working at it, hopefully.
Love
Thanks,
it.
folks, for tuning in. We appreciate it. Happy holidays to everyone. Be safe, and let's make sure everyone goes home. Take care now. Bye-bye.